Okay. Well, I'm happy to see everybody here today. It's an exciting time because I've heard so much about Shannon from Susan, and Shannon has done marvelous work with photography, and she's going to be sharing some of that with us today. So, looking forward to having it happen. And these are wonderful Zoom groups. It's wonderful work by Wendy and Karen. They are helping to bring people together, and we're looking forward to having many more of these in various areas. Today, Shannon is going to be speaking, and so I'm going to just turn it over to Shannon and let you take off from here.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So nice to see familiar faces and meet people in person here, and I recognize a bunch of the names, so this is great. This is great. So I guess I would begin when I have the unique position of I was not only photographing mediumship is kind of what I've been focusing on, and I began my project in 2001, so I've been working on it for 17 years now. And I was drawn to spiritualism and mediumship because my cousin had a reading with a medium where my grandfather came and gave details about details about how his death occurred that ended up being true and revealing this big family secret. And my entire family was taken aback, and it was like a big emotional occurrence. And this happened when I was 16. And since that moment, I always thought, how could somebody know such a thing? I was completely taken in by the thought of mediumship and how could we communicate with the dead. And so then I became a photojournalist. And in 2001, I also grew up near Lilydale, which is the world's largest spiritualist community. I don't know if many people have been there or heard of Lilydale, but I'm from an hour south. So, and that's where the message happened. So I began photographing there in 2001. And when I began my project, I didn't know anything about spiritualism or mediumship. I was very naive. But the people of the town took me in and taught me. And when I first began, I could not understand how you could be a sane person and talk with dead people. I could not, that was how foreign it was to me. But through this project, as I began documenting mediumship, I also started to work mediumistically with my own camera. And so my project it has multiple layers. First, it's a documentary project about modern mediumship and the different types of practices, but it's also my own exploration of the photographic process in combination with the idea of mediumship and the big question, how can we photograph such things? How do we photograph the unseen? And one of the most shocking things to me when I began my project was the discovery of spirit photography and the tradition of trying to photograph spirits and photographing mediums in practice. I went to a photography school, Rochester Institute of Technology. It's it's a really big photo school in the United States, and we studied the history of photography extensively. And this history was written out of those books that I studied from. And so it was the spiritualists in 2001 who said, there's this whole tradition, there's this whole other, outsider history of spirit photography. So I guess it's easier for me to talk with images. So is it okay if I jump into some images now?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go to my PowerPoint and I'm going to share. So I'm not sure how familiar the group is with the early spirit photos. So, okay. So, sorry. Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Okay. So when I began photographing in Lilydale, like I said, they showed me these spirit images, and this history was completely written out. And it's For me, it was a shocking visual history. I found these pictures very dramatic and intense and strange in a way I had never seen images like this before. And there was like an absurdity and a real like confusion about what was happening. And they spoke of death and life and birth and in this way that I had never seen images before. And so then I found out about ectoplasm and through these images, and I had heard about it through Ghostbusters. Is everybody, I don't know if you guys have heard or first heard the term ectoplasm from Ghostbusters, but that's what I thought when I heard ectoplasm. I didn't know about these images and the reality of them in spiritualism. So I'm trying to build from a PowerPoint, and sorry, it's like a little confusing where to begin. But I mean, when I first started making images, I was making really journalistic images. Slideshow. Oh, I got to go through the whole thing. I was making very journalistic images, and they were really simple. But everybody was talking about these invisible things going along with their experiences, and I felt, oh, sorry, I'm wondering the best way to do this. Sorry, it's a little klutzy of me. Maybe I'll switch back to my view slide sorter. Okay, I'll do the slide sorter. So I began making pictures really. Can everybody see this? This one?
The screen is part way off right now.
Oh, it is? It is?
No, you're fine now. It's fine now.
Okay.
No one else can speak, Shannon.
Okay.
Only I can speak to
Okay,
you.
so I was making these just really simple documentary images when I first began. There's some spirit art, healing, straightforward documentation, just of the people who lived in the towns, people doing mediumship. And then I got into these seance situations, and I could not really figure out a way to be true to the reality of the experience. And then I started having happy accidents with my camera. This is one. Oh, does that not show up? I'm just going to go. Sorry. Sorry. I'm just going to, I'll turn it off for a minute. Pause share. So you can see me now? Can you see my?
Yet.
Okay. Resume share. Okay. So this is, let's see if I open this up. Sorry, everybody.
It's okay. Just as a future hint for presentation, if you put everything onto your desktop, it makes it a lot easier to find everything when you need it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my first happy accident with the camera. I was photographing at the Lilydale Museum.
That looks great.
And this woman, she allowed me to photograph her. This is early on in the project. And in 2 frames, I was shooting film. I got this huge purple orb right by the side of her, by her face on the shoulder. And it was in the same spot in both frames, 2 different rolls of film. And I had never gotten anything like that before. And I printed the images and I brought them back to her and I showed them. I said, I got this really weird, this is in 2001. I had never even heard of orb photography at this point. And I brought the images back to her and she said, oh, that's my husband, Bob. That's him. He appeared in your image. And I had never thought of using photography in that way before. And the more I shot in Lilydale, the more I had a number of these synchronistic experiences with my camera where weird things appeared. So as I moved on into the project, it started to be like I would try to allow or play with this, letting other energy into the images. And so that's where I am with the project now. I will show, I'm trying to maybe I'll just go through, I'm working on a book and I have the extended sample of the book project, which kind of goes, maybe we could do this overall. Did everybody see?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So it will have like an illustrated introduction and with historical pictures. And then it starts off in Lilydale. This is the spot where my grandfather's message was given in Lilydale, in the woods at Inspiration Stump. There's that picture I just showed earlier, one of my first. And so these, pictures of the town, mediums, and then some of the objects I've photographed. This one up on the upper left is from the skull experiment. There's some spirit photography, spirit trumpets. This is a healing table. So it goes into the spaces, and then I started traveling to Arthur Findlay College because there was a stronger physical mediumship presence in England rather than the United States. And so this is early on in the project. These are fellow students in the cabinet. I learned about ITC there too, where you use technology in combination with mediumistic practices in order to get messages and create evidence. And so these are some of the ITC practitioners and some of the experiments I've done. This is somebody doing an infrared recording. And so then I started to experiment with my camera. This is an orb photograph I made in the upper left. To the right is an ITC experiment I did at Loch Ness. Below is a group who was doing water experiments, lower right-hand corner. And to the left, that's Susan Barnes with a smoke scrying experiment. And these are some other ones I've did. Then it goes into the physical mediumship. I've been photographing physical mediums now for, I guess, around 6 years. And so these are some of the cabinets I've encountered in my travels. This is a physical medium at Mont Cabral in France. This is the ectoplasm medium Kai Mugi. These are 2 images of him. This is on the left, Warren Kaler with ectoplasm. On the right, Kai Mugi with ectoplasm. This on the left is a physical medium in England named Gordon Garforth. And he does this, he has this amazing, you have this amazing experience where he actually enlarges his hand right in front of you. And it's the most wild thing I've ever seen. It's really dramatic. That was one of the most shocking physical medium experiences I've ever had. And on the right is another image I took of him. And, it's a long exposure. It just, it looks like, 2 heads. I understand it's a long exposure and that you can just read that as just simply a long exposure. But he says this is supposing what is going to happen next, where they said they're going to change, have him have another face beside his face. This is a healing at Mont Cabral in France. This on the left is the physical medium Sylvia Howarth. This is physical mediumship in daylight. She works in light a lot. On the right is the physical medium Sharon Harvey, and her spirit guide directed me to make this picture. He told me to do a long exposure and I would see his mask, the mask of him. And then this is one of my most dramatic images. This is Gordon Garforth again. And this is him in trance on the left, which it looks like he's got a mustache and almost these glasses, which he does not have in real life. And I didn't understand why he liked this picture so much. And then he showed me the picture of his great-grandfather, which is on the right. And so this is one of my strangest photographic synchronicities. So in the photographs, there's a lot of different ways I approach depending on the medium and how they photograph. So, I guess that was like kind of a lot of work. So maybe I could take some questions now.
That would be great.
Yeah, that was an overview of the project. And so I guess I should say too, the physical mediums I met, not all of them were working with ectoplasm that looks like the vintage images. Some were working with ectoplasm you couldn't see. It was more like an atmospheric thing. It changed temperature, it changed their bodies, like manipulated their faces. So it was hard I had approached it in different ways to photograph. I just use a regular professional camera, the camera I use for my professional assignments. I have used an infrared camera, and I do have some infrared images in the book, but I find that infrared is not really that interesting to me. I mean, I don't know. I find the regular camera more compelling, but you know, I think it's to each their own. I know I've seen some people do amazing work with thermal photography. You know, so I just think it's what I think you're best with whatever you're most comfortable with,
Sure.
because you can use anything really. When I was photographing Kai. And I actually just got back from a trip to Switzerland with him, and I have new images. I can't show them yet because he doesn't know we're still trying to work out what we're going to do. But those, I had to push my camera to the absolute edge to go as fast as it could in such low light. Mm-hmm. And then in other situations, I do the opposite. I try to make the exposure really long to let in as much energy as possible. Very much work with the medium. Like I said, like when I went to go photograph Kai, it's very collaborative with every medium. And we talk about the pictures. We talk about which ones were successful, what we see in them. It's a dialogue. They use them too. I never use pictures that people don't want me to use. It's really collaborative because this is their, you know, this is their work, but I do believe that I'm bringing my mediumship to it. Like it's like meeting in the middle. You know, there's a lot of merging going on. It's collaborative. Okay. Just the regular, I shoot with the Canon, so I use a Canon flash, but I don't use the flash too much. The only time I really have ever experimented with flash is when I'm using or photographing orb, trying to get orb phenomena. And I've been told that that's because that something in the flash activates the ions of the orbs. And so I've been successful with that. But for the most part, I find the flash kind of too intrusive. I kind of do a meditative thing where I get my seat, I put my camera in front of me on the tripod, and then I don't move. So then whenever I feel like something, it might be a time to take a picture, I just take it. And also I usually do get directions from the spirit team. So like sometimes they'll say, okay, put the camera behind your chair until we're ready, or wait until this moment, or do this. I actually do get quite a lot of direction from the teams. So I've tried video once, and it didn't come out very interesting. And I think I'm not that interested in video. So I think that might be why I'm really compelled by the still image. So that might be what I have done a new thing recently where I've sewn still images together to create a video. And that's been pretty interesting. I'm hoping to post some of those soon. Yes, again, I feel like photoplasm is a fluid term, kind of like ectoplasm. Like when you meet a medium and they say they're working with ectoplasm, you really don't know what's going to happen. Photoplasm, for me, means something that shows up in a picture that you don't necessarily see with your eyes. And so I really embrace that term. I think that's an interesting term. People disagree on these terms. I find that every single person I meet and talk with has a different way of describing. So I think it depends. They'll tell me directly, because usually they have to ask the team permission so I can even be in the room, so they know I'm going to be there. So then most times, usually there is a set of directions for me, and it just comes as part of the seance. So I try to be as part of it as much as possible. Like, it's not like I'm standing on the outside, you know, doing my own thing. I'm very much in with the sitting. I have well, since we were talking transfiguration, I have a transfiguration example. I'll find it first before I share my screen. And it's screen and view full screen. Okay, this is Susan Barnes in a transfiguration image that I made, and I just think it's really unique because I can see the smaller face off to the right of her. You can see Susan, and then there's like the tiny face that doesn't look like her face. And again, I understand that everybody sees their own, everybody is free to have their own interpretation. Sometimes you have an image that people don't see the same thing as you, and that's fine. But for me, I very clearly see a face to the side. And Kai actually analyzed this and says he sees the rupture of he sees a rupture between in the image too, so that makes it interesting to him. And then this one is a different one. These are 3 images of the medium Lauren Thibodeau. So this is first, she's going into the trance, and then this is the second one, which it looks almost like, this one astounds me because it almost looks like a cat or something. I don't know. And then this is a different one. So the point of putting them together is that she looks very different in all 3 of these images. And so transfiguration is something that's very interesting to me. I'm sure, Marion, I'm sure your transfiguration images are really interesting too. So does anybody have any requests of seeing more images or different types of images, or some of them bigger, or
the images are fine.
Okay.
There's no problem with your images.
Okay.
Everyone's kind of blown away, and I don't have anything coming up in the chat room.
Okay.
Yet. So keep on keeping on, my dear.
Okay, maybe I'll show these as a series. These are the one image. This was that medium I was talking about earlier, Sharon Harvey, and this is her. I said her guide had directed me on the time exposure, and then and so this is the first one, and that's the second one. And he said I would see the mask. And these are some of my favorite images because I feel like you just see the mask so beautifully. And if you notice on your screen, it's like there's like a purplish pink in the center that's not as red as the rest of the image, and that's really unique. And I've only had that happen a couple times.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Photoplasm is not seen on camera, infrared or normal, unless the team builds it directly towards the camera, we were told. Is that your experience as well?
That makes sense. That makes sense. It's never been described to me in that exact way. Mm-hmm. I love these. I'm going to show you guys these. This is again the Sharon Harvey. Maybe I'll do it on the okay, they were out of order. Sorry. So this is her again, and this is it begins, and then I love this picture because it actually looks like a mask jumping off of her face. To me, it does. And then that looks like it kind of like changed and took over and just totally, morphed the face. And then that's the last one. So these are 4 images of her. Same session, same sitting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another couple of questions for you.
Okay.
For those of us who would like to explore with their cameras, how would you suggest we begin? Are there situations in which it is more likely to see results in photographs?
Well, I think it depends. Like I said earlier, I'm going to stop my screen share and talk for a minute. Okay. So like I said, I think if you start from a place where you're dealing with equipment that you're comfortable with, and also like in a situation that you find interesting or comfortable or you find spirit, however you choose, I think it's just unique for everybody. I would suggest a tripod if you're going to be in a seance room. So you want to get your mind not on the camera. You want to make that just like a part of your experience as much as possible. And so that's why I say like start with comfortable. Okay, so I found one of August, and this one, okay, so I know what we can talk about here is that when you can see so this is August. And so see, it almost looks like, to me, it looks like skull, like ish. It does, and it's a little bit spooky. But August and I did not have a spooky experience. It was actually, I mean, he can write more tests, but I don't think it was a scary, necessarily spooky experience that we had. But I feel like this image is very dramatic and does speak about life and death coming together. And that's another thing I struggle with the images. With the red and the black, people are like, oh, that's scary, and then they get the wrong, when actually sittings are not scary. We all know that, when you're sitting in a seance, it's actually peaceful and healing, and there's a lot of like information and exchange. But the images, because of the red and the black, maybe people can share their feedback on this topic, is very dramatic and overpowering, and so that's why I've been trying to take I've been trying to play with other colors other than red. And I know a lot of people sit under red light, and I understand why, because you're more apt to see things under the red. But I love this image, but it is a very dramatic, intense image.
That's the end of the question.
Yeah, and I do get some interesting pictures in normal light, but I do think there is something to the darkened room. I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be pitch black, but I think by turning your senses down in one respect, other sensory experiences can happen. I think there's something to it, and I don't think, there's anything wrong with that, because I've been in all different types of situations, and I can see too why I can understand why people do want to sit in complete pitch black. I can understand why some people want to sit in light. I think different things happen under different settings, and it depends on what you're going for, I guess. Yeah. So most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, I am photographing under red light. But because it is a monochrome, it's just a red light, I've taken the artistic license to make certain images blue or brown, sepia, because those are classic photo monotones, a cyanotype or a sepia, because your eyes get tired looking at all that red. And you can see the images more. Sometimes you can see some of the subtle detail when I make the red images blue. And so I've always asked the mediums though before, do you mind if can I switch this to blue, because I think people read the image better. And so, like, for example, those blue images I just showed of Sharon Harvey, those were red that I made blue. I made cyanotype. Well, in order to open up for glitches, for the automation of the camera, that's why I started using the long exposure. And photo people will say, well, you're just making long exposures, and it's just really silly. And yeah, maybe that's true, but I'm finding some incredible things happening when I do allow the camera to be open. And once you open the shutter, I have no control over what's going to render or how it's going to render. I feel like it's sort of like in the Bachelor spirit of Kenneth Bachelor, where it's like when you want to do table tipping, oh, you make a party, you get the energy up. Like, I'm trying to let the energy, give it some room to play with. And therefore there's some ambiguity there, whereas, I'll have one image and a skeptic will read it one way, and then the person in the room will read it another way, and then somebody who wasn't there read it a third way. And I'm kind of trying to embrace this, because it gets conversation going, and it gets ideas out. I mean, there's playing with it's mystery. There's some mystery to mediumship, so I think it's okay if there's some mystery to the pictures as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that one has to be a medium to be successful in spirit photography?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think you definitely have to be open to mediumship as a practice. And when I first started photographing, people would tell me, oh, this is going to change things for you. It's going to open up, because it wasn't like I didn't believe. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so none of these ideas are really that different to the way I was raised. But I just didn't understand how the process worked. I had never been around it before. And it's improved my photography. And it's opened up my mediumship. I would call it more of like a spirit art form of mediumship, but it's absolutely, so I do think you have to be open. Yeah, at the very least,
Mm-hmm. Are there specific settings to use with a normal camera during a red light seance?
No, it always depends on how bright the light is, or, because I have no control over the setup of the light. So I'm just responding to the way that the medium sets the room up. So I arrange myself around the
setting.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one's more a comment than anything. I really love how you shared the merging of life and death and the whole dynamic in regard to August's photo.
Thank you.
The next one is a question. Are you familiar with John Matkowski's ghost messages he received on a Polaroid camera? He has a gallery in LA. There are hundreds of images he made with this type of camera.
I think that maybe I just heard about that from somebody else, if it's the same project. And I think I have one of them on my desktop. So that's a nice synchronicity. But I just found out about that work, actually.
Okay, the next one is a comment. I like your idea of partial sensory deprivation in darkened rooms. The next one is, have you done any comparison of doing video and at the same time using another camera to do still? Any differences on what they picked up?
I've never done that before. I recently, when I photographed Kai, he has a photographer named Marcus who's been working with him and who's done some wonderful, oh my gosh, his pictures are amazing of the past seances with Kai. And we were kind of seated one seat apart from each other, and our pictures were different. They were, there was a definite difference between our images. So that's the only time I've ever done anything like that.
Okay. Marion's made a comment. I let people in the workshop take pictures with my camera, and that is interesting that some can take the pictures and others not.
Yeah, it's energy. It's energy. It's like, no matter, even when you're talking about regular photography, the photographer's consciousness embeds itself in the photographic experience. I believe that. That's how you can see somebody's eye, and it's almost like when you're looking at somebody's pictures, you can almost see into their mind or their consciousness, and so that's definitely there.
This is just another comment. Photography seems very weird and spooky, even magical, when I really contemplate it.
Yes, I agree. It does a lot of things that mediumship allows you to do. You can see a picture of your loved one and have an experience because they were actually present there, and there's something embedded in there of them. And so, yeah, I find a lot of parallels between mediumship and photography, and they've been tied together since the very beginning too. They came about in the same time, and so that's very interesting.
That's the end of the question, Shannon.
Okay.
You've done well.
Thanks. So I wanted to just say,
sorry, someone's just snuck one in. Do you find that the images validate sitters' perceptions when not noticed by all at the time of the sitting?
Yes. And I've taken images where everybody sees something with their mind's eye that I don't see with my physical eye, but it's there in the picture. I've had a lot of that happen often.
Okay. Another question. How would you define spirit photography?
Well, I guess spirit photography is trying to photograph the spirit world, and not necessarily documenting mediums. Sometimes you just document mediums just what they're doing straightforwardly, and you don't get any spirit involved. But I guess it's an intention. That's how you would frame that.
Yeah. What advice could you give us to recognize fake photos of the past?
Well, this is an interesting question. Kai talks a lot about this. Kai says that, of course, there's going to have this fake quality to many of them because that's just part of trying to photograph the other side, and you have to accept this. So that's why when I called those other earlier pictures absurd and shocking, there is that kind of, there is this absurdity element, but at the same time, we know many of those mediums were not faking. So I don't know, this is a bigger question. I guess this would be like a topic we could all debate for 45 minutes longer. But that's definitely part of it. And it's like the same with me. How do you know it's not just a long exposure? Well, I guess I don't. It's just something I'm using to try to let energy into the experience.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. Next question is, what do you believe about angels? Have you seen or photographed any?
I've seen some ITC angel images a lot, like in the water, or or with orb stuff. You sometimes get fairy stuff or angel stuff. I think it's interesting. It's not. I'm not knowing. I don't think I've ever gotten a really strong angel picture myself, but I've seen some.
Inga makes a comment. Phenomena. Sorry, it moves when someone puts something in. Inga says, phenomena is often achieved with working with sitters' perceptions. This may explain the differences.
Yes.
Okay. August has done a memory check here. Shannon, remember that angel that appeared on an audience member's phone camera when we were presenting in Sardinia?
I don't know. I don't remember that specifically, but I believe it's ringing a bell, so I'm sure it happened. I'm sure.
Maybe we could ask August to talk about that briefly.
Sure, I'll unmute you, August.
Were beautiful, because when I was in Mont Cabriole, I had healing with Kevin, and during the experience, I felt like I was double, like there was my body and there was something else of me on top of the body. And so I didn't want to say it because I also thought I'm a bit crazy maybe. And then Isabelle Duchesne was there, and she said, look what we found, what we photographed with you. And that was exactly that. There was my body, and then there was my body again on top of it. So that was a really cool experience.
Yes. And I should say Isabel's work is amazing. I've seen some of it. I would love to see more of it. She does do amazing work. And she works with a flash a lot, I think. So she has a totally different process, and her work is wonderful.
And when we were in Mont Cabriole also, we had a sitting with the Indians. And so she let me look through her camera in the dark, and she had all these Indian people on her camera dancing, and it was just like so cool.
Wow.
And I've also got quite a few.
Thank you so much. I typed my website in earlier. You can find out more. I'm currently compiling this work into a book project. It's on pre-sale now. I have to sell about 500 books before it goes into production. And Dan Aykroyd from Ghostbusters is going to write the foreword, so I'm really excited. And there's lots of, there's going to be hundreds of images in it, and you can find out more. Anybody who orders it via the pre-sale will get updates, and your name will be listed as a patron. And it's not, I think it's 30 pounds. The pre-order, so whatever that translates into dollars. But you can wait until it comes out too. But you heard it here first, and there's a lot more info on my website about that, ShannonTaggart.com.